I want to introduce a fundamentally different way of thinking about our political economy. At the core of my framework is one simple idea: purpose. For lack of a better term right now, I'm calling this a purpose-driven political economy. The basic idea is this: for our political and economic system as a whole, and for every part of it, we need to be very clear about what its purpose actually is. Then we design incentives and accountability around that purpose. This might sound obvious, but it's really not how our current system works. What we usually do instead is confuse the ends with the means. We hold ourselves accountable to bad proxies, often because they are easier or faster to measure. And in the process, we lose sight of what actually matters. Let me give you an example. Take profit. We treat profit as an end, as a purpose. We even use the term for-profit company. But if you think about it, profit isn't an end, it's a means. Profit allows a company to survive. It allows it to improve, grow, and expand. A company needs at least zero profit to keep going. But profit itself isn't the point. A company's fundamental purpose is to create high-quality goods and services that solve real problems for people. And this isn't just about profit. Most of the things our system prioritizes, growth, efficiency, shareholder value, convenience, material gain, aren't purposes either. They're means. They're proxies. You can tell because if you take any of them and ask, to what end? The answer is never the thing itself. For example, we don't care about growth for the sake of growth. We care about what growth is for. And for most people, that's something like improvement, making people's lives better. So if you keep asking, to what end, and follow this line of thinking, you eventually arrive at what most of us actually care about: human flourishing. We want to live meaningful, fulfilling lives, and most of us want that for other people too. So at the end of the day, the purpose of our political economy should be to ensure that everyone can flourish. To be clear, human flourishing doesn't mean life without struggle. It doesn't mean being happy all the time, buying everything we want, or being endlessly entertained. Rather, decades of psychology research consistently shows that flourishing includes some version of 5 things: safety, health, economic security, a sense of purpose, and strong relationships with others. These are the things our political and economic system should be oriented around. These are the things we should design incentives for, measure, and hold ourselves accountable to. Which ultimately means we need to rethink pretty much everything. I want to come back to something I mentioned in my first video: my dissatisfaction with many existing political and economic philosophies. I think this framework gets to the heart of why. I won't pretend to be deeply versed in every philosophy out there, but I've noticed that many, especially Western ones, tend to center abstract ideals. And perhaps the biggest one is freedom. My issue with freedom is that it's a pretty subjective and ambiguous concept, which, as an aside, is probably why so many philosophers grapple with the idea. If you ask most people in the US whether they're free, they'll say yes, even though many philosophies would argue that they're actually constrained or oppressed by governments, corporations, or some other group of people. And that points to another problem. It's relatively easy to convince people they're free, even if they might not be. It's much harder to convince someone they're safe or healthy when they aren't, or that they have economic security, a sense of purpose, or strong relationships when they don't. It's not impossible, but it is harder, because these are things that people tangibly feel in their day-to-day lives. And ultimately, my biggest issue with freedom is how far do you take the concept? What does it even mean to be truly free? Because at the end of the day, as long as we live in the physical world and in relation to one another, there will always be larger forces outside of our control that constrain our choices and impact our lives. So while I do think abstract ideals like freedom matter, I don't think they should be the North Star of our political and economic systems. Okay, that's it for now. My goal going forward is to post at least once every 2 weeks, so we'll see how well I stick to that. If you have any thoughts on what I've shared, what resonates, what doesn't, I genuinely love to hear from you. And even if you don't, thanks for taking the time to listen.